I found out my parents sold the house I grew up in from a text message my sister sent by accident. It wasn't even meant for me. It said, "Just deposited the check. Can't believe mom and dad actually did it. Feels weird having this much money." I stared at that message for a full minute before I texted back, "What check?" There was a long pause, and then, "Oh God, wrong thread. Call me later." She never called. My name is Grant Ellison. I'm 57 years old, and until that Tuesday in March, I thought I understood my family. I grew up in Springfield, Ohio, in a 3-bedroom house on Maple Court that my father bought in 1974 for $18,000. He was 26 then, a machinist at the Navistar plant, and my mother, Joyce, was a receptionist at a dentist's office 2 towns over. I was born in that house. So was my sister Denise, 3 years before me, and my younger brother Todd, 5 years after. We grew up eating dinner at 6 o'clock sharp at a scratched oak table my father built himself in the garage, and every Christmas the whole family crammed into that living room even after we'd all moved out and started families of our own. My parents never had much. Dad retired from Navistar in 2009 with a pension that covered the basics and not much else. Mom stopped working around the same time when her knees gave out. They stayed in that house for 49 years, and every one of us assumed, without ever really discussing it, that it would stay in the family one way or another. Maybe get sold eventually and split 3 ways when they passed. Maybe one of us would end up living in it. Nobody had a plan. We just had an assumption, and assumptions, I've learned, are the most dangerous thing a family can build on. Denise lives in Columbus now, about an hour and a half from Springfield, married to a guy named Rob who sells medical equipment. Todd never left Springfield. He lives 12 minutes from our parents, married to his high school girlfriend Carla, 2 kids in middle school. I live in Dayton, about 40 minutes from the old house, close enough to visit but far enough that I wasn't dropping in every week. I run an auto repair shop, Ellison Automotive, on the east side of town. Started it in 2003 with money I'd saved and a loan from a credit union that nearly buried me in the early years. I want to be honest here, because this story doesn't mean anything if I'm not honest, even about the parts that don't make me look good. In 2011, my shop nearly went under. The recession hit small auto shops hard. People were fixing their own cars or just driving them into the ground instead of paying for repairs, and I was 3 months behind on rent for the building I leased. I had 2 mechanics on payroll and a business loan payment I couldn't make. I did what I swore I'd never do. I called my parents and asked for money, $50,000. I remember sitting in my truck in their driveway before I even went inside, rehearsing what I was going to say, feeling like I was about to admit I'd failed at the one thing I'd built for myself. My father didn't hesitate. He said, "It's not a gift, Grant. It's a loan, and we're not going to hover over you about it, but we expect it back when you're steady." I said, "Of course, Dad. I'll pay every dollar back." And I meant it when I said it. That's the part that matters, I think. I meant it. But the shop took 2 more years to stabilize, and by the time I could have started paying it back in real chunks, my daughter Ashley was starting college, and then my wife Denise— no, wait, I need to be careful. My wife's name is actually Karen— needed a second surgery on her shoulder that insurance didn't fully cover, and the $50,000 just quietly stopped being a topic anyone brought up. I sent my parents a check for $2,000 in 2004. I sent another for $3,000 in 2016. That's $5,000 against a $50,000 loan over 15 years, and if I'm being honest with myself and with you, I let it become something I didn't think about. I told myself they never brought it up, so it must have been fine. I told myself a lot of things. Meanwhile, my visits to Springfield got shorter and less frequent, not because I didn't love my parents. Life just filled in around the edges the way it does. I missed my father's quadruple bypass surgery in October of 2015 because I was dealing with a burst water line at the shop that flooded 3 bays of equipment, and Todd sat with Mom in the waiting room instead of me. I told myself I'd make it up to them. I always told myself I'd make it up to them. So when I got that accidental text from Denise about a check and about the house, my first feeling wasn't anger. It was confusion, and then a slow sinking dread, like the floor was tilting under a piece of furniture I thought was bolted down. I called my mother that night. She picked up on the 3rd ring, and I could hear the television in the background, the same old game show she'd been watching at that hour since I was a teenager. I said, "Mom, did you and Dad sell the house?" There was a pause, just a beat too long. "We were going to call you this weekend, honey. We didn't want to do it over the phone." "Do what over the phone?" "The house sold, Grant. Closed on Thursday. Your father and I are moving into that senior community on Route 68, the one with the little cottages. We looked at it back in the fall." I sat down on the edge of my bed. "Nobody told me you were even considering selling. We didn't want to make a big production out of it. It's just a house. It's just a house." My mother said that about the house I was born in, the house where I broke my arm falling off the porch rail when I was 9, the house where we scattered a little of my grandfather's ashes under the maple tree in the backyard because he asked us to. "Okay," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. "How much did it sell for?" $385,000. Can you believe that? Your father paid $18,000 for it." "That's great, Mom. That's really great. And then, because some instinct in me was already circling something I couldn't name yet, I asked, "So what's the plan for the money?" Another pause. "We're taking care of things. Don't worry about the details, sweetheart. We should let you go. Your father wants the phone." "He didn't come to the phone." I sat there holding my cell phone against my ear, listening to dead air for a few seconds before I hung up. For the next 4 days, I told myself I was being paranoid. Denise's text was probably about something small, a moving allowance, a little cushion for the transition. I almost convinced myself of that. Then on Saturday, Todd called me, and Todd never calls me. We text about football sometimes. We see each other at holidays, but a phone call from Todd is rare enough that I answered thinking something was wrong with one of our parents. "Hey, you good?" I asked. Yeah, everyone's fine," he said. And then there was this awkward stretch of silence where I could hear him breathing like he was trying to figure out how to start a sentence. "Look, I don't know if this is my place, but I think you should call Mom and Dad about the house money. Denise thinks you already know, but I wasn't sure."
Know what, Todd?
They split it. The proceeds after the mortgage payoff and the realtor and everything, Denise and I each got a check. I felt something go very still in my chest. "And me?" The line was quiet for a long moment. "I think you should call them, Grant. It's not really my thing to explain." "Todd, how much did you get?" He exhaled slowly. 225,000. I did the math without wanting to. If the house netted around 340,000 after paying off what was left of the mortgage and the closing costs, and Todd got 225,000, that left about 115,000. And Denise? I don't know exactly. Less than me, I think, because of some other stuff. You really need to talk to them, man. I told them this wasn't right, keeping you in the dark like this. You knew, and you didn't call me? I found out 4 days ago myself, Grant. I've been going back and forth with Dad about it since then. This isn't me being sneaky, I promise you that. I believed him. Todd has never had a manipulative bone in his body. He's the kind of guy who still tips 40% because he feels bad the restaurant's slow. But knowing he wasn't the villain in this didn't make the hole in my stomach any smaller. I hung up with him and sat in my kitchen for what felt like an hour, just turning it over. Denise and Todd split $340,000, roughly $115 for her and $225 for him. And I got a phone call where my mother told me not to worry about the details. I want to tell you I handled the next part with grace. I didn't. I drove to Springfield that same night. 40 minutes that felt like 4 hours, replaying every Christmas, every Sunday dinner, every version of my childhood. I thought I understood, trying to find the moment where I'd apparently been quietly written out of something. My father answered the door in his robe. It was almost 9 at night, and he looked at my face, and I watched something in his own expression brace itself, like a man seeing weather roll in that he'd been hoping would pass over the county. "Grant, we need to talk, Dad." My mother was in the kitchen in her nightgown, and when she saw me, she set down the mug she was holding a little too carefully, like she was buying herself a second to think. "Sit down, honey. Let me make you some tea." "I don't want tea, Mom. I want someone to explain to me why Todd got $225,000 and Denise got some smaller amount, and I got a phone call telling me not to worry about the details." My father sat down heavily at the kitchen table, the same table he built in 1979, the one that used to have my initials carved crooked into the underside where he never found them. "Sit down, son." I sat. "There's more to this than a phone call can cover," he said. "We should have handled the conversation better. I'll own that much right now. But there is a reason, and I need you to hear the whole thing before you decide how angry you're going to be." "I'm already pretty angry, Dad. I understand that. Just hear us out." My mother got a spiral notebook from the drawer by the phone, the same drawer that had held rubber bands and dead batteries and phone books for as long as I could remember, and she set it on the table between us like it was evidence in a trial. "Your father and I have kept a record for years," she said. "Not to hold over anyone's head, just to keep things straight in our own minds." She opened it to a page with 3 columns, one for each of us, and started reading off numbers. Denise, $18,000 in 2009 for the second year of her graduate program when her assistantship fell through. Todd, $0, not because he never needed anything, but because, in my mother's words, he never asked, and we never offered, because he never seemed to need it the way you two did at different times. And Ben, my number, $50,000 2011 business loan. "We always intended for this to even out eventually," my mother said. "We didn't expect a house sale to be the moment that did it. But when it happened, your father and I sat down and did the math the way we'd always talked about doing it. Total help given to each of you, plus whatever came from the house, split so everyone ends up even in the long run." "So walk me through the math," I said, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. My father took over. "The house netted $341,000 after the mortgage and fees. Add that to the $50 we gave you, the $18 we gave Denise, and the $0 Todd got, and the total pool between all 3 of you, past and present, comes to $409,000. Split 3 ways evenly, that's about $136,000 each." "Okay," I said slowly. "So, by that math, I should have gotten $86,000 more, not 0. My father didn't answer right away, and that silence told me more than the notebook had. That was the math, yes, he finally said. That's not what we did. Why not? My mother closed the notebook. Because the loan in 2011 was never really a loan to us, Grant, it became something else over the years. You sent us $5,000 total, 15 years, $5,000 against 50. We never called and pushed you on it because that's not who we are. We didn't want you feeling hunted for money by your own parents. But it hurt, and it kept hurting every year that went by. I would have paid it back. You kept saying that. You said it in 2015, you said it in 2018, you said it 2 years ago at Christmas. I'm not trying to be cruel telling you this. I'm telling you because you asked for the truth, and I think you deserve all of it. My father leaned forward, his forearms on the table, and his voice was quieter than I'd braced for, which somehow made it worse. Your mother had a hard surgery in October of 2015, you know that. I know, Dad. I was dealing with the flood at the shop. I'm not talking about the flood. I'm talking about 6 months later, when she had complications and had to go back in, and you didn't come that time either. He sent flowers. Your brother slept in a chair in that hospital room for 2 nights. I didn't have an answer for that because there wasn't a version of the truth where I came out looking like the son I wanted to believe I'd been. We decided, you mother and I, sometime around when we started looking at the senior cottages, that when this house sold, we weren't going to do the strict math anymore. We didn't want to write you a check for $86,000 and have that be the thing that finally squared us up on paper while everything underneath it stayed exactly as unspoken and unresolved as it's been for 15 years. We didn't handle that well. I'll say that plainly. We should have called you the day we made that decision, not after the checks were already in the mail, so you cut me out because I'm a bad son. That's not what your father said, my mother cut in, sharper than I'd heard her in years. Don't put words in his mouth to make yourself the martyr here. Nobody in this kitchen thinks you're a bad son. We think you're a man who has spent 15 years quietly deciding that love doesn't require follow-through, and this house was the first time the bill actually came due where you could see it. I sat there in my parents' kitchen, 57 years old, and felt about 14. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that running a business and raising a daughter and dealing with my wife's surgeries counted for something, that I hadn't just been absent, I'd been drowning in my own life the way everyone eventually is. But some part of me, the part that had been avoiding this exact conversation since roughly 2016, knew she wasn't entirely wrong, and that was the worst part, sitting in the truth of it instead of the anger of it. I don't know what you want me to say, I finally managed. We don't want you to say anything tonight, my father said. We want you to go home and think about it. And we want you to know that this isn't over, and it isn't punishment, and it isn't final. We're your parents, not a bank settling a debt. I left that night without eating the food my mother tried to put in front of me, without hugging either of them the way I usually did on my way out the door, and I drove home with the radio off, replaying that conversation over and over until the highway lights blurred together. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't call them, and they didn't call me, and I told myself that was fine, that I needed space, when really I think all 4 of us were just scared of what came next. Denise called me on a Thursday. I heard you went to the house, she said. Are we okay, you and me? I don't know, Denise. Did you know about the whole equalizing thing, the ledger? Not the details, no. I knew Mom kept some kind of notebook. She's kept it since we were kids. I always thought it was just her being Mom. I got $115,000 and I honestly felt weird about it, Grant, because Todd got so much more than me and I didn't understand why until Todd told me what he told you. Did it feel fair to you? What they did. She was quiet for a second. I think what they did with the money made a kind of sense once I heard the reasoning. I don't think how they told you made any sense at all. You should have heard it from them, sitting down, before the checks went out, not from my dumb accidental text. Yeah, I said, that part I agree with. For what it's worth, she added, I'd give you part of mine if it would fix this. I don't want your money, Denise. I don't think this was ever really about the money. And saying that out loud was the first time I actually believed it myself. I spent the next few weeks doing something I hadn't done in a long time, which was actually sitting with the discomfort instead of running from it into work or errands or the next fire that needed putting out at the shop. I thought about the $2,000 check in 2004 and how relieved I'd felt writing it, like I'd bought myself another year of not thinking about the rest. I thought about the hospital room in 2016, my mother in a gown with tubes in her arm, and Todd asleep sideways in a vinyl chair while I was 2 hours away telling myself the shop couldn't survive without me for 48 hours. I thought about my own daughter Ashley, 24 now, and what I would want her to understand about love and follow through when she's my age and I'm gone. I called my father on a Sunday afternoon in April, a month after that kitchen conversation. I'm not calling about the money, I said before he could say anything. Okay, he said carefully. I've been thinking about what Mom said, about love not requiring follow-through. I didn't like hearing it, but I think I've been doing that for a long time, and not just with you and Mom. I did it with Todd, showing up for the big stuff and skipping the actual hard parts. I did it with my own kid too, if I'm honest. My father didn't say anything for a moment, and I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line the way he does when he's choosing his words instead of just talking. Your mother's not going to want to redo that ledger, Grant. I want to be straight with you about that. We're not going to write you a check for $86,000. That ship sailed, and honestly, at our age, most of what's left is going into the cottage and whatever care we might need down the line. I don't want the check, Dad. I never should have made this about the check. Then what do you want? I thought about it for a long moment before I answered. I want to come to the cottage on Sundays. Actually come, not the drive-by version I've been doing. I want to fix whatever's broken over there instead of just talking about coming by to fix it. And I want to finally pay back what's left of that loan. Not because you're asking, because I'm not going to be the kind of man who lets his own parents write him out of an equation and then still doesn't square his debts. He was quiet again, and when he spoke, his voice was thick in a way I hadn't heard from my father since his own father's funeral. That would mean a lot to your mother. It'd mean a lot to me too. We didn't fix everything on that phone call. There was still a strange, careful distance at the next family dinner, the first one at the little cottage on Route 68. All 5 of us crowded into a kitchen half the size of the one on Maple Court, eating off paper plates because the good dishes hadn't been unpacked yet. Todd caught my eye at one point and gave me this small, relieved nod, like a man watching a bridge hold weight he wasn't sure it could take. Denise squeezed my hand under the table when Mom brought up, of all things, the maple tree, and how the new owners had already asked the neighbors if it was safe to cut down for more driveway space. They're going to cut down Grandpa's tree, my mother said, and for a second the whole table went quiet, all of us thinking about a version of family that didn't exist in any bank account or spreadsheet, the kind that gets buried under actual roots. I paid my parents back in full over the following 18 months, $500 a month like clockwork, wired the same day my shop's revenue came in, and every single payment felt less like settling a debt and more like showing up, finally, on time. My parents never gave me the $86,000, and honestly, somewhere in that year, I stopped needing them to. What I got instead was smaller and stranger and, if I'm being completely honest with you, worth more: Sunday dinners. My father teaching me, at 58 years old, how he actually built that old kitchen table, a lesson I'd somehow avoided my entire life because I was always somewhere else. My mother finally putting that spiral notebook away in a drawer at the cottage instead of carrying the weight of it around in her head for another decade. The house on Maple Court is somebody else's now. They did end up cutting down the maple tree. Denise saw it on a drive through the old neighborhood and called me crying about it, which tells you that grief doesn't always show up where you expect it to. But the family that grew up under that tree is still here, still imperfect, still capable of hurting each other in quiet, accumulated ways over 15 years without meaning to. My parents sold the family house and split the money with everyone but me, and for a while, that felt like the whole story. It wasn't. The real story was about every Sunday I didn't show up for 15 years before that check ever got written, and about what it finally took for me to start showing up now, when there's a lot less time left to make up for it.